Hey everyone, thanks for logging on to StateChampsNetwork.com. This is another online version of the Inside Buzz. Lorne Plant here with Tom Markowski of the Detroit News. And generally this is a pretty rapid fire segment. We might go a little bit longer than our normal 2 minutes this week just because we got a lot we want to talk about. So hopefully we will entertain you in the meantime. But let's talk about topic number one. And this is an extension of what we were talking about on television. And that is participation in high school sports in the state of Michigan. What's trending up? What's trending down? We talked about on TV what's trending down, the fact that girls basketball is at its lowest level in terms of girls playing high school basketball in 20 plus years now. But we're also seeing declines in other sports. But let's start with the good. You know, we're glass half full kind of guys. We're seeing some spikes, especially in lacrosse, which I didn't think was a surprise, but also cross country.
Well, cross country is it's a great sport to participate in. And just off the cuff here, I remember doing stories on cross country, and cross country is a wonderful sport for a teenage boy or girl to participate in because it's a social sport as well as an athletic sport. So I really encourage anyone to participate in cross country, and I think it's a marvelous sport. So I think, you know, trends be what they may, cross country is still going to get the numbers out there.
Yeah.
You know, we
Up
talked
for the fourth straight year.
Yeah, we talked about off camera a little bit that, you know, if you don't play a fall sport, and let's say you participate in basketball during the winter or football or baseball, your coaches want you to participate in some sport in the fall, and a lot of times that falls upon cross country. But I think the interesting one is the lacrosse. Now, lacrosse's numbers are going to jump, I think, just by the general state interest in it. More schools are offering lacrosse as a sport, so you're going to see the numbers spike that way too. And you wonder, and we're talking a little bit off camera too, are football players now turning to lacrosse as opposed to playing football? But you know, they're two different seasons. You can play both. You know, Perkovic out of Brother Rice is one that comes out off the top of my head, but
and Alessi.
There's a lot of, you know, because there's, in some ways they're similar. They're fast-paced sports, they're rough and tumble kind of, and your skill sets are kind of similar in some ways.
And you get the winter off in between. Right,
to, you know, gear yourself up. So, but the other ones, you know, even I didn't think football's numbers were going down that much. And we, you know, again, off camera, we're talking that I don't think the quality of football has suffered over the last few years as much as some other sports. Now, for instance, boys basketball, people ask me all the time, Tom, how would you compare today's boys basketball and the level of play to that of 15 years ago? And it's a no-brainer that 15 years ago, that level of play was much better. And I think the reason for that is the decline in enrollment throughout the state, which is well documented. And so you see that in a level. But it's funny how football, to me, I still think the football games I go to and at state championships at Ford Field, I still think it's played at a high level.
And you know, I think you really are onto something when you talk about what we're seeing increases in cross country. Even lacrosse to a certain extent is not as contact as concussion ready as football.
Right.
But also we're seeing growth in swimming. In both girls and boys. And I think that you've got a more educated parent base out there that are saying, you know, it's not worth it. If my kid doesn't really have a chance, let's say, at going on to playing a college sport in, say, football or hockey, maybe, you know, if I'm getting them interested in doing things like swimming and running cross country, they're still going to get that exaltation of playing in high school sports without being at the risk of having brain injury.
We are saying safety first here.
Yeah.
And I think you find that in a lot of other sports. And you find that in rule changes in sports. And I went to a quarterfinal in girls softball, and I was happy to see the pitcher from Canton wear a face mask to prevent a ball hit hard coming at her. And in other, that was just one instance. A lot of athletes in softball do that. And so I think you're getting that from hopefully coaches, but definitely at home where the parents are saying, you know, we'd love you to participate in sports. We encourage you to participate in sports, but we're not so, how should I say, certain that we want you to participate in football, for example, and because of the concussion syndrome.
Right.
But you get other sports too. Soccer is a sport that you can receive concussions in too. So it's not limited to football, but you could see those numbers transferring to other sports.
We're seeing growths in those sports, and I bet that's got to be in the mix. Let's get to topic number 2, and we're seeing a lot of coaching moves happening, including, this is really breaking, we're filming this on Thursday, and that's a new head man at Detroit Country Day. okay.
Well, Mark Bray has been the coach at Utica Ford for 9 seasons, and on Wednesday the word was coming down throughout the grapevine that the move was made. And I contacted some coaches, and I tried to contact Mark, and he talked to me on Thursday, said I couldn't talk on Wednesday, but I had a pretty good source on Wednesday, and I came out with a story. But I think it's interesting to see that somebody from Macomb County, perhaps not really a high-profile program, and really not a high-profile coach in Mark Bray. Mark Bray's, he's been around a while. He's very active in BCAM, the Basketball Coaches Association of Michigan.
Right.
So I think he's going to bring a different flavor into the Country Day family and program, so to speak. Rick Palmer, the assistant coach, the top assistant under Kurt Keener, who left, was the, how should I say, the runner-up in this.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people thought that his chances were good, especially Kurt was pushing for Rick. So I think there's probably some disappointment, I'm sure, on some side of that coin. And others are saying, well, maybe this is a breath of fresh air, bring in somebody new, somebody not really associated with, really a high level, nothing against Utica Ford, but Macomb County basketball, unless you talk about De La Salle recently, actually in past years, and Lance Cruz North, with the job that Jay Seletsky has done, you haven't really seen Macomb County basketball be that competitive on the state level. So, the quality of basketball in Macomb County is not up to snuff as when you compare it to the PSL or even Oakland County. So that being said, I think Mark's done his job, done his homework, and obviously the people at Country Day like what they see and what they've heard from Mark. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, he sold them on it, and good for Mark. And I'll tell you what, this is great for him. And maybe not that Country Day by any means needed a kickstart, because their success is unprecedented in terms of what they've been doing. However, sometimes when you have a legend like that, it really is kind of nice to just wipe the slate clean sometimes and flip it on its ear, and maybe you get everybody re-energized.
What'll be interesting to see, because this is just the infancy here, and bringing Mark Bray in, does that disrupt perhaps what was coming back? Because Country Day is going to be the favorite in Class B to repeat. Do the players get along with Mark? I'm just speculating here, because players, they want to play for coaches that let them play. I'm not going to hold anything back here. Players want to play, and they want to play for somebody that they enjoy playing for, and that's why you put out that effort, because you're a coach. I'm just saying that players have to get along with coaches and vice versa. So it'll be interesting. And while we're on the subject with Nate Oates, now officially leaving Romulus for Buffalo, and now we speculated on a little bit who would be that next coach. Jarrett Smith, who is the JV coach at Romulus for the past 3 seasons and has a fine record, by the way. They were undefeated this past season.
Former star at Romulus as well.
Is now the interim coach, and Nate was telling me it's pretty well a done deal that he will be the head coach next year. There have to be something very unusual happen in the meantime for Jarrett not to take over.
Right.
And Steve Glenn will be on staff as well as all throughout Nate's career at Romulus.
Yeah, I think it will be probably a smoother transition, as you can expect. The fact that, again, Jared played there, I think he's get respect from the players, and what he's done at the JV level, granted JV level, he's got those players playing well.
Right, he knows those players. Those players are moving into the program, to the varsity program. He's coached them already. I think it's going to be a smooth transition. I don't think they're going to see much of a drop-off. At the same time, Jarrett's not the coach Nate was, but I'll tell you what, Jarrett's going to have a lot of help in his, how should I say, continuing the program.
And players will continue to want to play there because they developed the reputation that they have.
They play a great schedule and all those other things.
Well, speaking of coaching, this Kevin Richards story, the head man at Grosse Pointe South, we're getting some back and forth. I know Mick McCabe wrote an article regarding this issue, and there has been a response that BCAM wanted to make sure was known. Right. There was a letter written to BCAM in response to McCabe's article last week, and just briefly, McCabe, in essence, he thought that Richards should have had a more severe penalty than just the 6-game suspension, which was 3 games by the Michigan High School Athletic Association, 3 games by Grosse Pointe South. Do I agree with that? I tend to agree with that. I would think 6 is somewhat of a slap on the wrist. It is a penalty, but when all is said and done, 6 games, when the season gets into its, how should I say, the meat of the schedule, it will be all forgotten. I think a little harsher penalty would have been more, how should I say, deserving in this situation. But
reading these letters and just what's happening in society today, the tweets, I think, were really part of the problem, maybe the crux of the problem here between Richards and the player in question. And tweets have become so common now. And what I got out of the letter that BCAM wrote was that tweeting has become so commonplace that 3, 4, 5, 7 tweets in a day is not uncommon. Now, what McCabe was pointing out, that there were, the number escapes me now, but let's say a dozen, for example, over a period of time, and his contention was that's a lot of tweets. I don't know, in today's society, is that a lot of tweets? Right. Perhaps 2 years ago, that might have been the case, a year and a half ago. That being said, I think tweeting Twitter pages has become almost like in conversation what we were accustomed to maybe 6 years ago, 8 years ago, and how you, quote unquote, might try to influence a player in coming to your school. So I think society has really changed, and tweeting has become such a, how should I say, an almost common thing.
Absolutely.
That
our cameraman is doing it right now.
And I think you got to look at it that way, that it's almost like, just bumping into somebody on the street corner or in a gymnasium or at a camp and just, saying hi or how you doing. But tweeting has just replaced some of that.
Yeah, no question. And it's still a fluid situation. And again, you've got strong opinions on both sides. And for those of you who don't know, that the coach was basically accused of recruiting, which of course is
undue influence is really the term.
Right.
And we could go on and on on the subject, but he got caught.
Yeah.
And talking to Richards off the record, he admitted his mistakes. He's going to go on. Right. He's going to carry out, and we'll see what happens.
Okay. Last topic. Let's go. We talked about it last week. We, one of the first to tweet about it once we got the rumors, and we had one of our writers, Brandon Hunter, who knows MALIK McDowell and people in that situation, that he was going to be leaving Loyola. And then, of course, the first rumor that popped up was that Southfield was a destination that MALIK McDowell, the fine and talented defensive tackle from Detroit Loyola, was going to be heading there. Since that time, of course, other developments have happened. It's not a done deal by any means. We just know that for sure he will no longer be a Bulldog.
Yeah, I think that was the case right away, that it was evident that his family, MALIK and his family, had decided to leave Loyola. The only question now remains is where he's going to school, and it looks like Southfield is the place. It could be another school in the vicinity. But talking to some of the coaches, and there wasn't too many that were coming on the record to me, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I just said, this is going to be a red flag to the Michigan High School Athletic Association because of the recent change in rulings of transfer students, and if you attend a camp that a coach that for example, that you might move into that school district was running, then that would be grounds for having that player in question ineligible for a whole semester or a whole year, not just one semester.
Yep.
Now, I'm not saying that this happened at Southfield. In fact, I'm pretty sure, talking with Tim Conley, the coach at Southfield, off the record, he says, I can't talk with him. Right. Until he makes that move into the Southfield School District, I can have no contact with him. And that being said, I said, if he doesn't cross all his T's and dot all his I's, I think the Michigan High School Athletic Association will come down hard on MALIK McDowell and not have him eligible next year. Now, I'm just saying that because I think that's the intention of the Michigan High School Athletic Association change in rules, that they want to, discourage such moves. But I know I'm going off on a tangent. I'm just surprised that MALIK McDowell would make this move.
Yeah.
He has everything going for him. He doesn't have to prove anything to anyone. He can get his choice of schools. The list of schools that have offered him a scholarship is ridiculous. From Alabama to Michigan to Florida State.
USC.
Exactly. You go down the list. There is nothing for him to prove. Why not complete your 4 years at Loyola? Now, I'm speaking for MALIK. I do not know the situation in their closed doors of their family and why they're making the move to wherever they're going. But I just find it interesting and actually discouraging a little bit that here you have the staff at Loyola really. And the educational part of Loyola too, nurturing this young man to be, growing up, and all of a sudden he splits his senior year for another school. So I find that a little bit.
We heard a disciplinary issue might have been involved. I've heard others rebuke that strongly. So again, only Malik and his family know really what the story is. I'm sure maybe when it all shakes out, maybe we'll get all that deal.
Sure.
Perhaps maybe he really wanted to compete at a high level in high school. Division 7 is what Detroit Loyola plays in.
That is a possibility.
Being at Southfield, he's going to be
against Harrison. Against Rochester
strong
Adams.
Division 2 school.
The Clarkstons and Lake Orients are also possible in their schedule.
PKC, Cass Tech, and Southfield. They'll open the season. You can't get any more big time than that. Friday night, 7 o'clock, August 30th.
I was telling people that Southfield, on paper, is going to have their best team ever this year, and that's without McDowell.
Yeah.
Now that if they get McDowell, who knows? They're a top 5 team.
Well, no question. I mean, the defensive line alone.
Right.
Lawrence Marshall.
Oh, gosh.
I mean,
they're going to be 2 beasts out there.
That'd be crazy. It'd be feasting on quarterbacks. All right, one more thing. It's kind of a bonus buzz thing here. We're going to go in the mailbag, and anytime we get viewer responses, I want to make sure that we address them here. And last week, Scott Bernstein was on the show, and he was talking about the fact that the PSL, in terms of the Division I talent that it churns out every year, has seen a sharp decline. Sure. Now, there are a lot of factors that go into that. School closures, open enrollment, charter school explosion, transfer epidemics, all that is the reason the PSL is kind of a shadow of what it maybe once was.
Right.
But just looking at some of the facts, and he was kind of really more sad, in terms of of seeing this school year the PSL is only sending 6 players on to Division I college programs in basketball.
I think more recently it might have been lower than that. But
right, and of those players, they represent just 3 high schools, and only one is going to a major collar program, and that would be Martez Walker to Texas, because you've got Khalil Felder going to Oakland, and DeAndre Johnson, Florida Atlantic, D'Angelo Stewart, South Illinois, Edwardsville, those kind of schools, Youngtown State, Kyle Seward, and Renaissance Clark Bishop, also to Florida Atlantic. So. Still, it's better than last year. In 2012, PSL produced just 2 Division I scholarships in Dorsey Walker, went to Iowa State, and Lloyd Walker from Crockett to Oakland. So less than a decade ago, his point was, obviously the PSL was a hotbed with the likes of the Renaissance trio of Crawford, Hairston, Tuan Porter. Of course, we had Pershing, Deshaun Sims, Redford's Manny Harris, Chris Douglas Roberts, and King's Ramar Smith. So we saw all that. He felt that it wouldn't go back there. So I got a response from Curtis Stove, who is a big-time PSL supporter, and he said that, your story about the decline of PSL basketball is a little disturbing. While it's true the talent has been reduced, this is also true for the entire state. He said, furthermore, I
would agree with that.
He said, furthermore, PSL basketball is still by far and away, in his words, the best in the state. He predicts as many as...
It's still up there. Far and away is a stretch. Go ahead.
And he predicts that as many as 8 PSL players will be receiving D1 scholarship. He mentions Woodson, Tillman of Pershing, Hales, Frederick Davis of Douglas, he feels.
Oh, yeah, Douglas is
There's Jackson of East English Village, and Carpenter of Cache, Leonard of Southeastern.
Right.
PSL from top to bottom, he said, is still hands down the best league in the state. And watch out, he said, for a very good young Western International team.
Oh, no question. Derek McDowell's got some really good young talent there. But it is a trend. It's throughout the state, and it hit the PSL harder. Take Derek Walton Jr., for example. Here's a guy at Chandler Park Academy that if you didn't have the situation with the charter schools developing so much in the Detroit area, he would be playing in the PSL.
Yes.
And Josh Jackson, I can go down the list. Vincent Hunter, those right there were 3 of the best players in the state last year that could have very well been in the PSL had it not the advent of charter schools.
Yeah, there are 54 PSL alums that have made it to the NBA. And that is saying something.
That is saying a lot.
So when you see it, it's really more of just a sign of the times, like we said, but just used to seeing this plethora of PSL players moving on, especially to major college programs. We don't see that now and again. All kinds of factors, but Curtis, we appreciate you defending the PSL. And anytime,
made some good points.
That's right. And anytime you guys send us email, we definitely will talk about it here on The Buzz. And you can just go to the contact page or the connect page at statechampsnetwork.com, and you can reach us there. So that's another version this week. We've got one more show, one more buzz. Next week we'll talk about what took place in Battle Creek this weekend. So that'll be all next week on The Buzz.